Mr. Hitchens has yielded his time, and therefore we move to questions, and we are directing those questions to students tonight. I want to repeat something Dr. Hazen said: there are stupid questions. I want to add to it, we are uninterested in your opinions, only your questions matter to us. I don't know where the microphone is. Can we hear the first question? Each participant will answer every question.
Dr. Craig, Mr. Hitchens, thank you so much. It's been great listening to you both. My question is for Mr. Hitchens. Mr. Hitchens, in your book, God is Not Great, you say that, quote, there are 4 irreducible objections to religious faith, end quote. The third being that religious faith, quote, is both the result and the cause of dangerous sexual repression, end quote. So here's my question for you. Is it good that the Bible prohibits humans from having sex with animals? Or is that an example of dangerous sexual repression?
The allusion I was making was not to the man-made in the ordinary sense nature of religion, that you can tell from studying some of its codes that it's humans that are inventing it. That's why so many of the injunctions in the Old Testament are, as you quite rightly say, concerned with agriculture, shall we put it delicately. But it's more that it's men-made, that it's designed to keep women in subordination.
But could you answer the question? Do you think the Bible is right to prohibit humans from having sex with animals?
I don't know of any good advice about having sex with animals. In favor of it, I mean say, look, there are things that if people do, incest is one, and cannibalism is another. If you do them, you'll die out. A society that permitted it would. There were societies in New Guinea that did practice cannibalism, and there's a terrible disease that you get called kuru if you do it, and it seems to me, if you like, there are some rules that are self-enforcing. That's not what when I was talking about sexual repression, I was talking about the enormous number of prohibitions on sex between men and women, and on the evident fear of female sexuality, and the superstitious dread, for example, of female menstrual blood. Things of this kind.
Dr. Craig, your assessment of that question and answer.
Well, I think the question illustrates that apart from God, whatever is in nature is right. There is no thing barred in nature if there is no sort of objective moral code. So the question is a good one because it illustrates that here is a guideline for sexual expression that is very good for human beings and not something that's meant to be repressive or harmful to human beings. In fact, the studies I've seen says that religious people have more fun with sex than people who are not religious, and it's actually shows that they are more sexually satisfied in marriage and so forth. So I think the question makes a good point.
I think I have to have another bite at this. This tempting cherry. You see, if it's true that, as I think it is, that nature is pretty indifferent, pretty callous, pretty random, then who is the designer? But many people say concerning the ban on homosexuality, for example, in the Old Testament, they'll say, well, homosexuality is against God's law and it's against nature's law. Well, in that case, why does nature see to it that so many people are born homosexual? Or, if you want to rephrase it, why does God have so many of his children preferring sex with their own gender? It doesn't help. It doesn't, in clarifying and elucidating this, it doesn't help to assume a supernatural authority. Whereas, if you look at the reasons given by Maimonides and the other sages for the practice of circumcision, it is precisely to dull and to blunt the sensation of an organ which I don't think even... well, I'll leave it there.
Our next question.
No, but it's explicitly designed, in other words, to reduce sexual pleasure, make it more of a painful duty than a celebration. Well, you asked for it.
I don't want to misrepresent myself. I was a student here and graduated. Somewhat by the skin of my teeth, but Mr. Hitchens, you stated that some of your most strongly stated arguments are that the results of religion, violence, death, destruction, the motivation being religion discredit those who would promote a belief in God. However, I think there's an imbalance there in that the nuclear bomb was created by physicists and is the most demonstrable violence perpetrated on mankind. So I wonder how you respond to that.
Well, physics isn't an ideology. Physics isn't a belief system. It's a science.
Well, I think that would be subjective.
I mean, you could, any more than the Marie Curie discovering radium makes her practice morally different. I mean, it's not comparing like with like. What I'm talking about are specific religious injunctions to do evil, to mutilate the genitalia of children, for example, to take the pastor, Douglas Wilson, who Dr. Craig was just mentioning, with whom I crossed swords several times this year and recently in Dallas. I happened to be mentioning to him about the commandment to exterminate the Amalekites in one of our debates, and he said that commandment is still valid. If there were any Amalekites, it would be his job to make sure that they were all put to the sword. And some of the virgins left over for slavery, purposes better imagined perhaps than described. I think this is a very serious problem. I'm not taking refuge in the commonplace that sometimes religious people behave badly, that would discredit religion. That would be a very soft option. I'm saying there are specific biblical, scriptural injunctions to do evil.
Dr. Craig, in that regards, those who are announced atheists who have done evil in the world, particularly in the last 20th century, the Marxists, the Trotskyites, the Stalinists, have they done more damage in your view and more evil than the Christians?
Well, this is a debate, Hugh, that I don't want to get into because I think it's irrelevant. I as a philosopher, and I mean this, am interested in the truth of these worldviews more than I'm interested in the social impact. And you cannot judge the truth of a worldview by its social impact. That's just irrelevant. Bertrand Russell, in his essay, Why I'm Not a Christian, understood this. Russell said, you cannot assess the truth of a worldview by seeing whether it's good for society or not. Now, the irony was, when Russell wrote that back in the 20s, he was trying to refute those who said that you should believe in Christianity because it's so socially beneficial to society. It was just the mirror image of Christopher Hitchens' argument, where saying you shouldn't believe in it because it's socially detrimental to human culture. But I think Russell's point cuts both ways because it's a valid point. You can't assess the truth of a worldview by arguing about its cultural and social impact. There are true ideas that may have had negative social impact, and therefore we have to deal with the truth of these, the arguments for and against them, and not get into arguments about has Marxism or Chinese communism been responsible for more deaths than theism in the 20th century.
No, I completely concur with what you say there. I mean, I just wanted to say that I think that those commandments are injunctions to do evil, but I would much prefer to say that the tribe that thought it was hearing these instructions from God to kill all of its rivals, exterminate all its rivals for the Holy Land, might possibly have had, I think it's overwhelmingly probable it did have, a need to seek and claim divine approval for the war of greedy extermination, annexation, and racist conquest that it was going to undertake anyway. In other words, I don't think there was an authority issuing that commandment, whether it was morally good or otherwise, as a matter of truth. But I would add, and I think the concession is very well worth having, that there is absolutely no proof at all that Christianity makes people behave better.
Now, wait a minute, I didn't concede that. What I said, I wasn't going to argue that because it's irrelevant, but by no means did I concede that. And I do appreciate as well the way you framed the issue about the Canaanites. I think you're quite right in saying that this is not an issue about whether or not God exists. Rather, this is a question about biblical inerrancy. Did these ancient Israelites get it right in thinking that God had commanded them to do these things, or did they, in their nationalistic fervor, think God is on our side and do something which, in fact, they weren't commanded to do by God? So that this isn't an issue between atheism and theism. This is an issue about biblical inspiration and inerrancy, and that's an important issue, but it's not one that is on the floor tonight.